This is a production of PBS Charlotte.
Coming up on this Carolina Impact Special Report, we explore Charlotte's growing pains. Transportation affects us all.
I blame the city planners for not planning properly.
Education impacts everyone's future.
You're saying, I'm going to build this school with 100 classrooms. By the time you open, you probably need 125.
While there's a housing boom, that boom doesn't extend to affordable housing.
We're at the beginning stages of an affordability crisis.
These issues and more on our Carolina Impact Special Report, Charlotte's Growing Pains. Good evening, I'm Amy Burkett here at Romare Bearden Park in the heart of uptown Charlotte. You know, I love being a part of this beautiful city, and it is exciting, all the growth that's happening. However, there are plenty of growing pains to go around. Tonight we begin our special report on Charlotte's growing pains with a look at transportation. It affects us all, and I am certainly one of them. I actually live over the border in South Carolina, and I fight that Interstate 77 traffic every single day, going and coming. And I know you have similar stories. So we sent our Jason Terzes out to take a look at some of our transportation growing pains.
An earlier accident on 77 southbound right around Tyvola has cleared from the travel lanes, but the damage is done.
Transportation. It's one of the key building blocks of any economy.
Traffic already backing up into uptown Charlotte back to the John Belk Freeway.
If people aren't moving, productivity suffers.
Northbound 77 also pretty tight there from Arrowwood up through Woodlawn.
With Charlotte growing at such an exponential rate, keeping up with transportation demands is quite a difficult challenge.
I blame the city planners, I blame the city planners for not planning properly for the growth of Charlotte.
Not long ago, Charlotte was just another dot on the map. Uptown was the place to shop, and the airport was so small, you could park right across from the terminal. In 1960, the city's population was 201,000, making it just the 59th largest city in the United States, with just over 700,000 people in the metro area. By 1990, Charlotte's population had nearly doubled to 396,000, 33rd largest city in the U.S., with just under 1.6 million people in the area. And just 26 years later, in the year 2016, the city's population had doubled again, ballooning to 827,000, 17th largest U.S. city, with nearly 2.5 million people in the metro area.
The growth is definitely moving at a high rate.
And what used to be a 5 o'clock traffic jam now starts about 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
And there's a reason why people are moving to Charlotte.
Many reasons, actually. Quality of life, a growing job market, mild winters, and a low cost of living as compared with other major cities.
We're growing fast, we're adding population, we're adding jobs, and we're growing differently.
As a major commerce center, Charlotte is attracting millennials and an increasing number of newcomers from across the country and around the globe.
The inner city now is more prosperous, it's younger, it has higher incomes.
Trying to keep up with the influx of people, the city and state's departments of transportation are currently working on several major road projects, including the expansion of I-77 through the Lake Norman area with its controversial toll lanes, the widening of I-85 in the Concord-Kannapolis area, the improvement of Independence Boulevard, and the nearly 20-mile-long Monroe Connector bypass, which will stretch from near I-485 to US 74 east of Monroe. Even the airport is undergoing a major expansion project.
Sometimes I don't think the city planners are taking into consideration when they're doing the zoning and they're building all of this housing and these shopping centers, just how much traffic is going to be added to roads that are already overcrowded.
And other major road projects are on the horizon.
We've started the planning process to expand I-485 from the Johnston-Ray area over to US 74. We're also looking at managed lanes in that corridor. In addition, we're looking at adding an interchange at Weddington Road.
So yes, it's challenging sometimes to balance the pace of growth with the pace of infrastructure coming online. Those infrastructure projects take years to plan and design and acquire right-of-way and move utilities and actually do the construction.
Keeping up with roads and infrastructure will be paramount as the city continues to expand. In the 15-year period from 2010 to 2025, the 10-county Charlotte metro area is expected to grow by over 600,000 residents. And over the following 15 years from 2025 to 2040, the area is expected to see another 800,000 people, bringing the metro area's population to over 3.6 million. That's a 30-year increase of 1.4 million people. It's basically like moving the entire population of Dallas, Texas into the region.
From a congestion perspective, big cities are just congested, every one of them.
Future highway expansion is planned, but DOT officials say we will get to a point where some highways can no longer be expanded. And as more people move here, congestion is only going to get worse.
So with that comes a demand for a higher quality walking environment, higher quality bicycle facilities, more public transportation.
That's why officials say mass transit will play a much larger role in the years to come.
Charlotte has been very deliberate in its growth and very specific on how mass transit plays a very important role, not only in the quality of life of this region, but also the economic development strategies.
The Lynx Blue Line opened a decade ago, connecting South Charlotte to Uptown. It cost $463 million.
This stop is Tyler Station.
Nearly 16,000 people use the light rail on a typical weekday. Riders relax, poke around on their phones, and listen to music. Some even go old school and read the newspaper. At $4.40 round trip for adults, riders say it sure beats sitting in I-77 traffic and dealing with uptown parking.
Traveling to Uptown, there's a lot of traffic, and so to avoid traffic and save some wear and tear on my vehicle, which is a truck, and it's a little more cost effective to ride the light rail.
It's more consistent. If there's an accident on the roads or something of that nature, then it slows down the commute, whereas I'm on the light rail for about 2/3 of my commute, and it's more consistent in time.
In early 2018, the Blue Line extension is set to open, connecting Uptown north to UNC Charlotte. Its cost is about $1.2 billion. Charlotte Area Transit System CEO John Lewis recently unveiled an ambitious plan to build 3 new light rail lines all at once. The Silver Line connecting Uptown to Matthews, the Red Line connecting Uptown to Huntersville, Cornelius, and Davidson, and a 3rd rail line connecting Uptown to the airport. Estimated cost for the project, at least $6 billion.
We will have to have a discussion with the citizens of this region on, number one, do they still want to move that plan together and get it done by 2030? And if so, are they willing to invest in that?
The hub for the new rail lines would be the much talked about Gateway Station in Uptown. It would also house a relocated Amtrak terminal, Greyhound bus depot, as well as local bus service and streetcars. Lewis points to cities like Salt Lake City and Denver, which invested billions into similar projects.
Denver took a very aggressive move with that, established their fast tracks system where they built out 6 rail lines and did them all at once.
But of course, the question will always come back to who pays and how much.
We're stuck at this point from a financial standpoint.
The state paid 25% of the original Blue Line costs, but will only contribute 10% for future projects. And with a new administration and new budgets in Washington, there's no telling how much the federal government will kick in.
We have to put all walks of life into transportation decisions because they affect all walks of life. It affects infrastructure, it affects business, it affects opportunity for growth, it affects education. And so we have to balance all of that when we're making transportation decisions.
With its growing population and busier roads, Charlotte is already experiencing and will continue to experience some major growing pains. Decisions made now will greatly affect the future. For Caroline Impact, I'm Jason Terzis reporting.
So what are your concerns about transportation? We'd like to get you in on the conversation. Please head to our Facebook page and let us know what's on your mind. If you're stuck on one of Charlotte's overcrowded roads, it could be because you're headed to one of Charlotte's overcrowded schools. Charlotte-Mecklenburg School District educates just over 150,000 students in 176 different schools, and it's said that about 100 of those schools are overcrowded. So how do we educate all these people flocking to our area? Well, we sent Jeff Saunier out to explore the issue.
Yeah, we're outside Ardrey Kell High School, one of Charlotte's biggest high schools, where they've been feeling Charlotte's growing pains pretty much since the day they opened 11 years ago. Out front, Ardrey Kell Road is a 2-lane that carries enough traffic to fill a 4-lane on most school days. The campus itself is surrounded by popular neighborhoods that didn't even exist back when they were planning this school. And not far from Ardrey Kell, well, there's a lot more growth coming. More homes, more traffic, more everything.
I wanna be bigger. bigger than the fame, bigger than the lights, bigger than the money.
Ardrey-Kell looks big enough, at least until the bell rings.
I wanna be bigger, bigger than it all, bigger than the glory, I can never fall.
And then, well, this is what happens when a school that's supposed to hold about 2,000 teenagers instead has about 3,000 teenagers.
I would get more specific here. It says just create a Quizlet on them.
Welcome to Ardrey-Kell's class of 35. Not a reunion, more like, holy cow, I can't believe there's a class of 35 crammed in here. 35 kids in a psych class.
In this room, yes.
That's not ideal teaching.
That's one of the smaller I've had in the last 4 years.
Teacher Leah Burton says at her last school, outside of Charlotte and CMS, classes were about half this crowded, but, you know.
That's public education for you, and in booming areas, the schools they build, they can't keep up with class size, but it's doable, it's manageable.
Whenever you build a new school and you have some new housing there, then you get an influx of more new housing. And that's what happened out in Ardrey-Kell.
School Board Chair Mary McCray explains that's why the board voted last year to start designing Charlotte's new school buildings bigger with more classrooms, just trying to keep up.
Exactly. And so from the start, if you're saying, okay, I'm going to build this school with 100 classrooms, you know, as a high school, by the time you open, you probably need 125. And that's part of the problem.
Another problem is money. These bigger schools have bigger price tags. McCray says the old cost of a new elementary school was between $26 and $32 million. Now a new school starts at $36 million, which leaves less money for expanding older schools that are also overcrowded.
We have to increase the size of our elementaries now. You know, like an elementary school like Albemarle Road, which was built for maybe 26, no more than 30 classrooms, but you're sitting there with over 1,000 kids in there.
Actually, it was 1,152 last year here at Albemarle Road Elementary, which is almost twice as many students as the school was built for.
How long has it been overcrowded?
As long as I can remember, so I know at least for the last eight years.
Principal Philip Steffes says a typical day in one of Charlotte's most overcrowded schools often means lining up for scheduled bathroom breaks and late lunches in a cramped cafeteria.
Roll your hands up, roll your hands up, roll your hands.
Small classrooms like this one are shared by 2 and sometimes 3 different teachers.
J is for jelly.
All at the same time. And when they still need extra space,
keep rolling, rolling, rolling.
Many teachers on carts that have to be mobile.
These are teachers who don't have a classroom because there aren't enough classrooms to go around.
Exactly.
But here's the real eye-opener at Albemarle Road Elementary. This shanty town of mobile classrooms mostly hidden behind the school for hundreds of second, third, and fourth graders.
How many mobile classrooms are we
right now we have 37 mobile classrooms occupied.
There's actually more kids outside in mobile classrooms than inside in regular classrooms. And when it rains, well, kids get wet. And families get frustrated, waiting for the new school, just now being built a few miles away. That's supposed to provide relief, eventually.
You're one school out of 100 or 200 or how many schools there are, so what do they really care about your one little school?
We're talking with Andrea Diaz and her daughter outside their school, Waddell Language Academy, which used to be a $33 million new high school. But for 10 years, its 80 classrooms were half empty, until CMS closed Waddell High and reopened it as a successful K-8 school instead. Now CMS wants to close Waddell again, spend $4 million more, and reopen it again as a high school again, leaving parents wondering, what's the plan here anyway?
we're already 10 years behind. We need to start getting caught up. We need to catch up. We need to get the buildings and the schools that can accommodate this growth. Or you got to think of how to change that and how to make it smaller so that you can handle it.
I wanna be bigger.
Yeah, one more issue we've got to ask about is how does a big school system like Charlotte keep it personal? Not just for the kids who are learning in those crowded schools, but also for the parents who just want someone to talk to when they've got a question or a problem. You think some school districts are too big? Is CMS one of those school districts that maybe is growing too large to have that personal touch from a superintendent's point of view, from a parent's point of view?
You know, it's interesting because I've heard that. I don't think many people who get service today from, say Amazon's too big. Sometimes there is scale that allows you to really do great things on behalf of your customers. In my case, my customers are kids. I think our scale allows us to bring resources to kids that we might not be able to bring if we were a smaller district.
New school superintendent Clayton Wilcox adds that the key to CMS becoming not just a bigger school system, but also a better school system is making sure that every main office, whether it's on a school campus or at CMS headquarters uptown, isn't just a complaint desk for parents, but reaches out to parents before there's a complaint, no matter how big or how crowded their individual school might be.
The most recent numbers show 58 CMS elementary schools are at or above capacity, along with 27 middle schools and 18 high schools, all overcrowded. So what's the most overcrowded school in the Charlotte-Mecklenburg system? The CMS numbers show it's K-8 Collinswood Language Academy at 187% of capacity. 3 other schools are above 170% capacity. While there's a lack of space in our classrooms, there's also a lack of affordable places to live. Now listen closely, that doesn't mean there's a lack of places to live. There are apartments popping up all over the city. The challenge is many of our residents can't afford to live there. So we sent our Jeff Rivenbark out to take a look at the issue of affordable housing.
Patricia Mapp racks up hundreds of miles each week as a courier. She's grateful not only for a job, but also a place to live. Because not long ago, she didn't have a place to call her own.
I was living in a hotel for about 6 months.
She found temporary housing at the YWCA in South Charlotte, but soon she has to leave, and finding another place to live hasn't been easy.
Especially in good areas, you know, where there are good schools and good activities for the kids.
Across Charlotte, areas that once offered affordable housing options are being torn down and replaced with pricier homes and apartments.
I have a real fear that keeps me up most nights about the affordability of our city.
Charlotte Councilmember LaWanna Mayfield chairs the city's Housing and Neighborhood Development Committee.
When you have this new growth where people have decided, hey, this is a great location, but they're not thinking about all the people that lived over here before, whether they were homeowners and or renters, that displacement is going to cause a lot of challenges because we're creating a false market as far as what is affordability today in housing.
As more high-rise apartments and condos go up, the city says it still needs 34,000 affordable housing units, and that's based on the number of households or people who spend more than 30% of their annual income on housing. According to the Charlotte Housing Authority, the population is expected to grow 83% by 2050. And the need for affordable housing is expected to increase by an additional 40,000, bringing the total need to over 70,000 units.
We are just like any growing urbanizing city, and so this challenge is not unique.
As Charlotte's Director of Housing and Neighborhood Services Department, Pamela Weidman says there's a definite correlation between affordable housing and upward mobility.
When you have an adequate supply of affordable housing, you provide another opportunity or avenue for people to rise on an upward economic mobility trajectory. They can concentrate on education, they can concentrate on obtaining and maintaining a good job.
After last year's protests following the police shooting of Keith Lamont Scott, Charlotte City Council identified key areas to tackle regarding economic inequality. Affordable housing was number one. The city set a goal to create or rehabilitate 5,000 units within 3 years. The city says it's created 2,200 units over the last 12 months, or about 44% of its goal. Nearly 100 new units are here at The Landing in South Charlotte, which provides housing for seniors living on an annual income of $24,000 or less. But some say more needs to be done.
We have 30,000 luxury apartments going up in Charlotte. None of them have any affordable or even workforce housing in it. And what that means is that if there was 20% of those that were set aside for workforce housing, that would have been 6,000 units. So we have to find a way to engage the private sector more to build more workforce and affordable housing units.
Getting the private sector to do this is difficult because it's costly. Not to mention, some homeowners aren't keen on the idea of having affordable housing in their neighborhood.
It's as if we don't care. We're becoming a society that's so individualistic that we only want to be surrounded by others like us.
My personal goal, and people in this industry, our goal is to move from a NIMBY, not in my backyard, to a YIMBY, yes, in my backyard. And I think you do that through proper education of the value of affordable housing to a city over the long term.
Charlotte is just beginning to be a growing thing, to tell you the truth.
71-year-old Henry Harris survives on $800 a month. Do you ever feel like Charlotte is kind of squeezing out the poor folk not to live here?
All the time. Every way you look at it is growing, you know, so I might as well just be satisfied with whatever I can get and, you know, and just live the best I can, you know. We're the low income people, you know, and then, you know, we can't go where everybody else go. You know, just whatever they build, you know, just don't forget about it because, you know, there are room for low-income houses in Mecklenburg County.
73-year-old Namaya Neras enjoys gardening.
Right here we have a sunflower, squash, tomatoes.
She lives at the Renaissance, a new mixed-income community with more than 300 units for seniors and families.
I'm retired, and that's why I look for a good place to live.
The Renaissance offers apartments for people who depend on public housing assistance and others who are able to pay market rental rates.
So these are our 2- and 3-bedroom townhome units.
As president and CEO of Laurel Street Residential, Dion Nelson's private sector development company built the Renaissance on what used to be a public housing site.
The former Boulevard homes had fallen into disrepair. It really was not an appropriate and quality place for people to be living.
Nelson's development company is unique because it focuses on building integrated communities where people with lesser means blend in nicely with those with greater means.
I consider us a social enterprise. We are mission driven to create mixed income housing so that all families of all income levels have an opportunity to live in high quality housing that they can afford.
But to create more partnerships with the private sector developers requires funding, and lots of it.
Mixed income housing requires us to build market rate, quality housing, but make some of the units available to households at a lower income and at a rent that they can afford. That requires some form of subsidy.
In 2016, Charlotte voters approved a $15 million bond vote to fund affordable housing, but the city says it's not enough to keep pace with growing demand. That's why the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Opportunity Task Force recommends increasing Charlotte's affordable housing bonds from $15 million every 2 years to $50 million. And voters will likely get to vote on another housing bond referendum in 2018.
I don't want Charlotte to become so expensive that you have to have 3, 4, 5 people living in an apartment in order to survive, or you can't afford to purchase a home and be a homeowner, since that's always been promoted as the American dream. You should have options. We're losing quickly options of housing.
The Patricias are our neighbors. And so we need to understand that we need to support those families, and it is a collective responsibility of citizens of Charlotte to create housing that is affordable to all people. And we need to do that regardless of what neighborhood that we live in.
But until city leaders, developers, and voters commit to doing more, Charlotte's affordable housing problem will likely increase as the population grows. For Carolina Impact, I'm Jeff Rivenbark reporting.
Now, the IBM CEO once said growth and comfort don't coexist. While Charlotte grapples with growth, the good news is that our local economy is strong. In fact, few places across the country are experiencing the explosive growth projected for our region. We want to hear what you have to say about the issue. Please join the conversation on our Facebook page at PBS Charlotte. The issue of growing pains isn't an easy one to solve, but when you have an economy growing at the pace that we have, there's no way around Charlotte's growing pains. From Romare Bearden Park, that does it for us this evening. We appreciate your time and look forward to seeing you back here again next time on Carolina Impact. Good night, my friends.
Production of PBS Charlotte.